I'd like to call to order the joint meeting of the Glendale City Council, the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, and the Glendale Housing Authority for December 7th, 2010. May we have roll call for the council, please?
Council members Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Najarian.
Here.
We have roll call for the Redevelopment Agency.
Agency members Draymond.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Friedman.
Here.
Roll call for the Housing Authority.
Authority members Draymond.
Here.
Friedman.
Here.
Mincy.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Parazian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Quintero.
May we have your report, please?
The agenda for the December 7, 2010 joint public meeting of the Glendale City Council, the Glendale Redevelopment Agency, and the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on Thursday, December 2, 2010 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. The first item?
Okay, at item 1, public hearing, Director of Community Redevelopment and Housing regarding proposed Broadway lofts and entertainment development project to be located at 200 East Broadway. Environmental review, Stage 2 design, other land use entitlements, and parking agreement, imposition of fees and/or allocation of additional tax increment funds from project for public facilities. At 1A, agency resolution certifying the EIR, making findings related thereto, and adopting a statement of overriding considerations. 1B is a council resolution certifying the EIR, making findings related thereto, and adopting a statement of overriding considerations. At 1C is an agency motion approving Stage 2 design. D, an agency motion approving sign program. E, agency motion approving 80 space parking exception for commercial use. F, agency motion approving 4 space parking exception for off-site parking of 4 residential guest spaces. And G, council motion approving 3 conditional use permits for on-site and off-site sales, service, and consumption of alcoholic beverages. 1H, council motion approving use variance for indoor recreation center. 1I, council motion approving 3 sign variances. 1J, council resolution approving instrument imposing covenants on real property. K, agency resolution approving instrument imposing covenants on real property. And 1L, council motion approving the density bonus housing plan and density bonus housing agreement.
Well, where do we begin? Let me start with opening the public hearing, because I'll forget that.
Just a housekeeping, when we get to all these, one way or the other, how can we group them, if at all?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Madam Chair of the agency, Chair of the Housing Authority, take 1A and 1B first separately,
Okay.
1C through F, and include K together, and you can group G through J and L together.
Well,
Okay, we got that.
Unless there's a request by a single member to...
okay, I think there will be such a request, so let's not
Okay.
assume that this is going to be a single vote action. Therefore, since the hearing is open, Mr. Starbird.
That's for the staff report. I'll go to Phil Lanzafame, Director of Community Redevelopment and Housing. Phil?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, Ms. Chair, members of the Redevelopment Agency, and Mr. Chairman, members of the Housing Authority. As you probably noted from the number of approvals, this is a unique project. It is the first in Glendale to use the permissions of SB 1818 in a private, affordable housing project. It's mixed incomes, it's mixed use. The unit size is smaller than what we've experienced in Glendale in the past. It's a different product altogether. And there are interests of all 3 bodies, as again noted in the approvals. The project description, and the reason we're here today, these are the final approvals for the Broadway lofts. The project description, basically 6 stories, 167,000 square feet, a mixed-use project. There's 208 residential studios, lofts, and two-bedroom units. They range in size from 360 square feet for some of the studios to 1,125 square feet for two-bedroom units. 14 of the units will be restricted for very low-income residents. There's approximately 12,000 square feet of restaurant space and approximately 13,000 square feet of indoor recreational commercial space, total of 25,000 on the ground floor. Parking is in 3 levels of subterranean garage. It will be for the residents. The commercial parking and guest parking will take place in the marketplace garage pursuant to a parking agreement that I believe the redevelopment agency is currently engaged in with this property. The proposed project, or I should say the project is proposed to be LEED Silver and is taking advantage of our downtown specific plan incentive for that. Because of the complexities of the project, we want to give you a presentation of the different elements. If you will indulge us to go through, each of these elements builds on the one prior to it. The project, you will see and we'll discuss, in many cases takes your direction, your policy direction on other areas in advance of legislation, particularly with the Art and Entertainment District. So we'll be talking about the context, both of the downtown specific plan and that Art and Entertainment District. Ellen Loomis will take that portion. Mike Garcia will talk to you about the permissions and the procedures of SB 1818, which are density bonuses. Annette Vartanian will talk through the different approvals and why they're required. Tony Lacacciato from Impact Sciences will give a presentation on the environmental review that was conducted. And then finally, the development team will talk to you about and present their design specifically with the changes from Stage 1 to Stage 2. If you saw in your report, there's a large team here. Everybody is assembled from planning, from community redevelopment and housing, so we'll be here. But again, I would ask your indulgence, if you have clarifying questions, certainly, but if you would let us present the entire package, then you'll have all the information together. So with that, if there aren't any questions, I'll introduce Alan Loomis.
Thank you. I have a few slides to pull up presentation. Mr. Lanzafame noted, this project is located in a downtown specific plan area, which was adopted in 2006 to promote a mixed-use, vibrant, pedestrian-oriented downtown. And let's see, where do we? Specifically, the project is located at the corner of Maryland and Broadway, which over the past year, we've discussed with the council and the agency the idea of Maryland Avenue in this area corridor, this 2-block corridor, as being kind of the heart of the proposed downtown arts and entertainment district. So this is a project that's located right in the center of that. In our conversations thus far with the council, we've suggested that as part of enabling this district, we need to make various amendments to the specific plan to allow for recreation centers and entertainment uses on Maryland. We've proposed also some amendments to the sign ordinance in this area that would allow for more creative signs than our current sign program allows. And that's both is reflected in the proposed project. As I noted before in past presentations on the Art and Entertainment District, this site, the old Circuit City building, is one of the opportunity sites for jump-starting this Arts and Entertainment District. So that's part of the context for thinking about the design, ultimately, of this project. I wanted to talk also briefly about how the downtown-specific plan applies to building up this project. First of all, as noted, the site is existing as the building previously occupied by Circuit City. That Circuit City, as we know, has left town and has left the world altogether. And so the building is sitting vacant, but as part of the original approvals of Circuit City, they have an agreement to park their required parking for the commercial use, which is 170 cars, in the marketplace garage. That's sort of existing today and has carried over into the proposed project. In effect, You can imagine that as a mixed-use project, it's essentially almost taking the housing component and putting it on top of the old Circuit City building. The 170 cars sort of that were associated with Circuit City and the Marketplace Garage kind of carries through with the current project by amending the existing covenants. The downtown specific plan at this site allows for a 4-story building with an FAR of 2.5. FAR is how we measure density in the downtown specific plan, and basically that's taking the lot area, multiplying that by 2.5, and that equals the total density as measured in square feet. In order to get to the 112 units that you could put in there, you basically have to go through applying the downtown specific plan design standards related to open space, setbacks, ground floor uses. In this case, we require commercial uses on the ground floor, and minimum unit standards in the downtown specific plan. So that's how we arrive at the 112 units. If you apply our current parking code, that requires 168 parking spaces just for the residential component of this project using the downtown specific plan. The downtown specific plan also allows for height and density bonus, providing projects provide one or a combination of a number of different incentives. In this case, the project is proposing to be a green building and proposing to get a silver rating, LEED rating from the U.S. Green Building Council. That entitles the project to increase in density up to a 3.0 FAR, extra square footage, and also go up to 6 stories or 95 feet. Using the same calculation we did before, that generates 138 units, and you can see the increase in the required parking spaces per residential code. I will note that the LEED standard is something that projects get after the building is built, and you go through and you calibrate all the air conditioning equipment and the lighting fixtures and all that sort of stuff. So we really don't know that the project's going to receive the LEED rating until after it's done, and that complication is reflected in one of the covenants that I believe legal staff can speak to. On top of that bonus, which is allowed under the downtown specific plan, the project is also proposing to use the state's affordable housing density bonus, SB 1818. And to speak through that and some of the requirements of that, I will turn to Mike Garcia and our legal staff.
Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon, members of council, Mr. Mayor, members of the Redevelopment Agency and Housing Authority. As Alan stated and Mr. Lansfame stated before him, the project has an affordable housing component, and the applicant is proposing to make 14 of the units affordable to very low-income households. Alan went through the steps of how we measured the density. When you are applying the density bonus statute, SB 1818, what you do is you compare how many affordable units there are to what's termed the maximum allowable residential density. For this project, what we did, again, is applied all the development standards in the DSP and determined the maximum envelope. And then given the fact that they're using the LEED incentive, that number came out to the 138 units. Given that they're using 14 affordable units, that's 10% of those 138 units are going to be affordable. And because of that, they're allowed a density bonus of 32.5%, which gets them to the 183 units. And in addition, it also provides that they're entitled to, for the studios and one-bedroom units, it entitles them to provide parking at 1 space per unit, inclusive of the guest parking, which is less than our code requirement for multifamily projects. In addition to the density, the mandatory density bonus, what I'll call it, which is what we're required to give, the 32.5%, they are also entitled, because 10% of the units are restricted to very low income, and it's a sliding scale for the incentives as well. They're entitled to 2 regulatory concessions. What they've applied to use those regulatory concessions, basically what that is a deviation from code standards, is for the FAR, which because the DSP allows them up to 3.0 with that DSP incentive, they are requesting to go up to 3.62. That says 3.75. That would be what they'd be allowed to go to at a maximum, but 3.62 is actually what they're asking for. In addition, they'd like it to use one of their concessions for a concession on the minimum unit size. Again, that's 600 square feet, and the unit sizes for the various units explained in the staff report. There's 140 of those units will be less than that minimum unit size. In addition, the density bonus statute, the state law, provides that in addition to the mandatory density bonus, an applicant is allowed to request more density to provide that affordable housing. And so that discretionary density bonus is also before you as part of the overall density bonus housing plan. So they would like to go from the 183 units to the 208 units to build that 208 unit project. So that's a discretionary action that the council will have to take action on this afternoon. In addition, the 183 spaces are for the 183 units. There's an additional, for the additional 25 units, we are requiring them to provide code parking, and Annette will get into this a little bit later. They're providing all the code parking for those additional 25 units, except for 4 guest spaces, which they're requesting a parking exception for from the redevelopment agency. So that's sort of the mechanics of how the SB 1818 and our density bonus ordinance works to provide them the density bonus and the concessions for parking, unit size, and FAR. So I guess I'll hand it over to Annette now.
Good afternoon. I'm going to quickly discuss the approvals requested for this project. The staff report discussed in detail of the approvals, and I'm going to just focus on the key and important facts. The developer is requesting approvals for the Stage 2 design. This represents the design development phase. The developer has taken into consideration the agency and council comments as well as the principal urban designers' comments from Stage 1, and they will go through the change from Stage 1 to Stage 2 approval, and Greg Parker will handle that at a later time. In addition to the Stage 1 approval, they are requesting approval of a sign program. This is generally done in conjunction with the Stage 2 approval so that the agency and the council has an idea of the types of signs that will be on site and as part of the project. And it also allows for consistency of the aesthetics of the signage so that we don't have different types of signage throughout the project. Now moving on to the conditional use permits. As indicated in the final packet, the developer is proposing 3 different alternatives for the ground floor, and I'll quickly highlight them. And this is done to provide the agency and the council an idea of the types of uses that may potentially occupy the ground floor space. The first option is 4,500 square foot of fast food, which could potentially be a wine bar or a coffee shop, but our zoning code designates it as fast food, in conjunction with 12,000 square feet of restaurant with a bar component, which is very similar to BJ's restaurant. The second option is 12,000 square foot restaurant with a bar component and with a retail, but the developer is trying to target a smaller scale market, much like a Fresh and Easy. Now, the final option is the mixed use option, which includes the 12,000 square foot restaurant with bar component and 13,000 square foot indoor recreation center. That is what the code, that's a code definition for use such as Amsterdam Billiards, Bullmore, Lucky Strike, which incorporates a restaurant, maybe a martini lounge in conjunction with a high-end bowling alley. Now, we're requesting the conditional use permits with the final entitlements for the sales, service, and on-site consumption of alcoholic beverages for any of these ground floor commercial uses. Staff recommends a blanket style CUP, which is very similar to what the Americana at Brand received, and the approval of the CUPs would be at the discretion of the planning director. Now, if there is a deviation of greater than 20%, if the use expands larger than 20%, that we would bring it back for council approval. Now, moving on to the covenants. The first one is the parking and land use. As Alan Loomis mentioned, in 1997, the agency entered into a parking agreement with Circuit City for use of 170 spaces at the marketplace. This agreement runs with the land, so the developer has the option to request these spaces for their development. The agreement is set to expire in 2027. So the developer is requesting that the agency extend that agreement for additional 33 years, which would then take it to 2060. The developer will continue to pay $15,000 a year for maintenance costs, much like Circuit City did. The second part of this covenant is the DSP incentive for the LEED Silver certification. As mentioned, the developer is attempting to achieve LEED Silver certification, and as such, they're granted a density bonus per the DSP. And so they are entering into a covenant to ensure that the project is built to receive the certification, and they have agreed to provide a letter of credit equal to the value they have received from the LEED Silver incentive. When the certification has been issued, the letter of credit will be terminated. And it's just important to note that Kaiser Marston did this analysis, and when they did the analysis, we found that the fiscal impacts that are indicated in the report are very conservative. They should actually be a little bit more, which is good news. The second covenant is for the Density Bonus Housing Agreement and Density Bonus Housing Plan. As mentioned, this basically covers the density bonus granted by SB 1818, as well as the concessions, which are to get an increase in FAR and the smaller unit size. In addition to the reduced parking granted by SB 1818, it also restricts the affordable units for 30 years, and it binds future owners just in case if the property is sold. But they are requesting an additional density bonus for 25 units, and that is a discretionary approval. Almost done. The discretionary approvals, the first one is the commercial parking. As mentioned before, there's 3 different alternatives for the ground floor space. We analyzed all 3 alternatives for zoning purposes, CEQA, as well as parking and traffic analysis, and we took the most intense use, which is the mixed use option, which combines the restaurant with the Lucky Strike concept. And this option requires 250 spaces. As such, an exception for 80 spaces will be required if the agency enters into the covenant agreement providing the 170 spaces in the marketplace garage. Shared parking analysis was prepared by LLG, and that they found that there is enough parking supply in the marketplace garage to accommodate these spaces. In terms of residential parking, they get a reduced parking for only 183 units. The discretionary units, the 25 units, need to be parked at code. The code requires 235, but the developer is providing 231, resulting in an exception for 4 spaces. And again, the shared parking analysis accounted for residential guest parking in the marketplace and found that they can accommodate the 4 spaces. Now moving on to the use variance. This is for the use which may be something like a Lucky Strike or Bullmore, which is classified as an indoor recreation center. As Alan mentioned, that this is responding to the policy direction provided by the council and the agency. And the last approval is for variances for signs. Again, the signs are responding to the policy direction. The signs are creative and an integral part of the building architecture. And the sign program will ensure that the signs are aesthetically pleasing and are consistent throughout the project. Now, I'd like to have Tony come and discuss the final EIR. Oh, sure.
So I just want to be sure that I understand all of the bonuses that they're entitled to. So I understand they're entitled to the density bonus because of the affordable housing component, and they're entitled to the height bonus as well because of the LEED certification they're getting. Can you just elaborate on the 2 discretionary bonuses? Now, does this mean that they get 2 more for what they're doing? We just get to pick which those are, or we get to approve what they are?
They're requesting 1 discretionary bonus. The first is the LEED, or the DSB instead, and the SB 1818 is applied on top of that. They're requesting additional density, which will take it from 183 units to 208, which is for 25.
I thought that there were 2 other bonuses that, am I misunderstanding? In the staff report, it referred to the 2 bonuses that they're entitled to that are directly linked.
Concessions. So those are concessions. Those, the first one is for the increase in FAR, which which is part of that discretionary bonus, and the second is for the smaller unit size. And those are classified as incentives, and they're entitled to two.
So they're entitled to those?
To two.
So they're entitled basically to everything that they've asked for, with the exception of the sign variance, the 4 parking spaces for the guests. I just want to separate out, because there's a lot of variances here, but I want to just be clear about which variances they're entitled to and which variances they're sort of asking for on top of that.
Well, the attorney will answer that.
Members of council, agency and authority, Councilmember Friedman, the density bonus that gets them from 138 units to 138 to 183 units, that's a mandatory bonus because they are providing the affordable housing. And Ms. Vartanians is right, the additional density bonus to 208 is discretionary. With respect to the concessions or incentives, the way that the statute is worded, those concessions are mandatory unless there's a couple of findings that the city can make. One is that they don't need the concessions or incentives to make the affordable units pencil out with the entirety of the project. And as the report indicates, the analysis was that the incentives do make the affordable units feasible. The other basis to deny one of the requested concessions is if the concessions, the project with the concessions, will have a significant adverse impact on either public health or safety or the physical environment. As the report notes, the project with the added density does have significant and unavoidable impacts. The environmental impact report did study a reduced density alternative, which has one less significant and unavoidable impact. So arguably there is a basis to deny those concessions in addition to having the ability to deny the discretionary density bonus. In our view, from the legal perspective, this is one project. It's a project that requested 208 units with the requested incentives. If we have, in essence, the city has the legal discretion, whether it wants to use that discretion, it has the legal discretion to deny the project on the basis that they've requested more density than we're required to give them.
So in other words, they basically get these incentives mandatorily unless we can make findings, significant findings that it would adversely affect
health, safety, or the environment.
Or the environment. So I just want to make it clear, because it sounds on the face of it as though they're coming in and asking for a whole lot of stuff, but actually they're just taking advantage of incentives that are already in place.
For the most part, yes.
Okay.
Well, let me clarify that. Isn't it the other way around? Once there's an unmitigatable impact, doesn't the council have to find the statement of overriding concerns? So we have to, I mean, it's not the way Councilmember Friedman stated it. It's the burden is on the council then to find out that these impacts have overriding concerns.
Correct.
Not the other way around.
Well, there are significant unavoidable impacts, and the council and the agency do have to make, really the agency has to make a finding of significant overriding impacts. With the density bonus statute, if they were just asking for the mandatory density bonus and incentives, one of the bases to approve a statement of overriding consideration is that there are legal considerations that, in other words, require us to approve it. That's not the case here because they're asking for more. So it's kind of a both. There are some things that we have to approve regardless of, we would have to approve regardless of the significance of the environmental impacts. That would be the density bonus, the mandatory density bonus, and the parking concession. The incentives, not so much. But again, the way we look at it is that this is one project and we have discretion to approve it or deny it because of the density bonus statute and because there are environmental impacts that can't be mitigated.
And that gets us to the 183 units, but then there's the additional 25 units that aren't covered by the concessions, the SB 18, the leads.
Correct.
That's what you call
the discretionary density bonus. The statute gives the city the authority, if we adopt an ordinance, which we have, to grant a larger density bonus than requested.
Okay, so carry on.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Locacciata with Impact Sciences, and the environmental review document may be the simplest part of the project before you this afternoon. So I'd like to run through the environmental review process the City of Glendale conducted for this project and focus on those impacts you were discussing a minute ago. After a preliminary review of the potential environmental effects of this project, the city determined an EIR should be prepared addressing 9 topics: aesthetics and visual character, air quality, and greenhouse gases, which is a new topic that analysis is required starting at the beginning of this year, land use and planning, potential noise impacts, population and housing, public services, recreation, transportation, traffic and parking, and utilities and service systems. The information analysis in the draft and final EIR shows that impacts would be less than significant for a majority of the topics assessed. Aesthetics and visual character, the change in the visual character of the site and the surrounding area was determined to be less than significant. Air quality and greenhouse gases, the emissions that would be associated with the permanent use and occupancy of this project are less than significant in relation to the numerical standards the South Coast Air District has established. The new topic of analysis this year is the potential increase in greenhouse gases and the relation of that to statewide targets. Assembly Bill 32 was adopted a few years back, and the goal is to take the 2020 combined greenhouse gas emissions of the state of California, reduce them back to the 1990 levels. That's about a 29% reduction. So what has come through the Air District now is a requirement for cities like Glendale to look at the greenhouse gas effects. For this project, with the LEED features and other features, its urban location, other things that factor into those tables full of numbers you saw in the air quality section, shows that this project, while the emissions to start with will be above the level that requires additional analysis, they'll actually be knocked down over 40%, almost 41% by the design features included in this project. So for that reason, the greenhouse gas emission increase is not significant, as looked at in the EIR. Land use and planning, the project was found to be consistent with the applicable policies in the downtown specific plan and the city's general plan. With regard to noise, after the project is built and occupied, the interior noise levels will meet the city standards, and the increases in exterior noise levels will not exceed the city standards. Transportation, traffic, and parking. There were 6 intersections assessed in the traffic study. All will operate at an acceptable level of service as defined by the city with the additional traffic from the project. As Annette mentioned a few minutes ago, a parking demand analysis was conducted because there are parking variances and exceptions required. That analysis shows that the available parking is sufficient to meet the demands of the project. There won't be a parking impact. Utilities and service systems. When it comes to water supply and conveyance of that supply to the site, there's no significant impacts. We have a small list of impacts that are potentially significant but mitigated by programs the city already has in place. Increasing the density downtown will require more services from related to fire protection, emergency medical services, police services, and even library services. But the city has fees in place the project will pay that will mitigate those impacts to a less than significant level. Likewise, the city has fees in place to mitigate impacts to the sewer collection system in downtown. Project will be required to pay those fees, and that'll mitigate its impact on the sewer collection system. The treatment system already has adequate capacity. Last, I just wanted to go over more specifically those list of impacts that can't be fully mitigated to a less than significant level based on the thresholds used for analysis. Those are the unavoidable and significant impacts of the project. First, one impact in the aesthetics and visual character section. This project, and there's a mixed-use project that is being built right across the alley. Given the height of them, they're each going to shade each other during different times of day, as you'd expect with buildings of this height. It's close there. The threshold we used in the analysis was if one building is going to shade any habitable areas, the other one, for over 2 hours a day, that's identified as significant. These 2 buildings will shade each other in the summer from noon on, as the sun shifts, and in winter from about 3 o'clock on. There's really no way to mitigate that other than have shorter buildings, so that's the reason why that impact is identified as unavoidable in the EIR. Air quality, we looked at 4 different phases, air quality modeling, or 4 different phases of construction, applied all the mitigation the Air District has. All the impacts get down to less than significant except for the beginning phase of the project. When you knock down the building, the demolition phase, you're going to have some dust and particulate matter that'll be above the threshold the air district has set. So that'll be for a short period during construction. A way to mitigate that. 2, with noise, there'll be occasional peak noise events and some vibration during construction. That will be unavoidable and can't be mitigated, typical with construction of a project. Recreation, as you know, the council has adopted a recreation impact fee, and you're also setting aside tax increment to provide funding for recreation facilities downtown. These two sources together fully mitigate the impact of the project. What the EIR recognizes is that since tax increment rolls in over time, and you haven't permanently set that aside, that there's some possibility that the impacts of the project on recreation facilities wouldn't be fully mitigated. But right now, the tax increment and the Parks and Recreation fee will fully mitigate that. Last, related to one of the topics in the Utilities and Service System section of the EIR, Los Angeles County likes to remind everyone that landfills do fill up. So while the amount of solid waste generated by this project can be accommodated in landfills with permitted capacity sufficient to accept it, over time it'll tip a little more in with all the other uses in the area, and eventually that'll have a cumulative impact on landfills and we'll need to permit some more. So that's a consistent finding you've seen in each one of your EIRs that the county recognizes. So for that reason, there is a statement of overriding considerations in your packet today that lists the benefits of the project that CEQA allows you to weigh against these impacts. And that's an overview of this EIR.
Question.
Yes.
One of the significant and unavoidable impacts that you identified in the EIR was the recreation. You just told us that despite the tax increment earmark and the park impact fee, there would still be an unavoidable impact. Correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This has been a consistent finding in your environmental review documents only for the reason that the tax increment, if your fee had been set at that full mitigation level, you'd collect the full fee when building permits are pulled. Instead, with the tax increment set aside, you're getting that annually over time. And the document simply recognizes that while you've set aside that funding for now, you haven't permanently set it aside. So that's a reason for that finding. You certainly have set up a system that will mitigate, provided all those funds come in as you currently plan them to.
The other component besides the tax increment was the park impact fee. Mm-hmm. And did you tune in last week? Did you see what council did last week?
No, Mr. Mayor, I didn't.
Let me ask you then, when you determined and analyzed the park impact fee, what level of fees did you assume in your analysis?
Current Phase 1 fees is what?
The current Phase 1 fees? Did you know something that we didn't know, that the Phase 2 fees, despite the calendar deadline, was going to come into effect? In other words, you assumed the 3,500 fees, is that correct? Correct? Okay. Well, why did you assume that? Let me ask you that. That wasn't voted on. That was set before council, and by the operation of time, that would have gone to a 7,000 fee. Did you know something and staff know something that I didn't know or council didn't know?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, members of the Agency Housing Authority, the fees that were analyzed were the fees that were in place at the time that the EIR was circulated. I think really the key answer to your question is that it would not change the impact analysis because, as Mr. Locacciato has indicated, his conclusion in that EIR is based on the fact that we don't currently charge the full nexus fee. Even bumping it to the $7,000 per unit level would not change that conclusion because we're still not at the full.
In fact, the 7,000 fee is much less than what the actual impact was. The actual impact is about 15,000, right?
It's determined by the nexus study that the city considered when it adopted the impact fees. That's correct. But it would not change the EIR's conclusion, whether it be at $3,500 or $7,000 per unit.
And when you say impact, recreational impact, what does that mean exactly? I mean, explain to us what that means. Does that mean crowded Soccer field?
As
No tennis courts? What does that mean?
As identified by CEQA, it's really about the impact of additional use of those facilities because you've got increased population density in the city. So it's actually about wearing out the park and recreation facilities faster because they're having a higher level of use.
Like grass that used to be grass is now dirt.
That's exactly it. Because CEQA's focusing on that secondary impact of increased
Heard
use.
that before. I wish you had come forward perhaps last week and we had again raised these issues and had a clear statement from staff when we were talking about these fees.
Okay.
Okay. That's
Thank you.
all I had. Next.
Next is Greg Parker with American Multifamily, who will go through the final design of the project.
Before you get there, I have a question. Can you outline the fees that they're going to pay up front and then what will be paid each year?
Sure.
In other words, to parks and libraries, to the art fund, to or however we do the arts and so on?
As mentioned, this is a conservative estimate. The projected art fee is approximately $300,000. Projected development impact fee $700,000, since that's now been extended 1 year.
And where does that go? That fee?
That goes to parks and libraries.
$700,000 this year. What about from now on?
Madam Chair, members of the Council, Agency, and Authority, we have projected approximately $384,000 annually that would come to the Redevelopment Agency. We would set aside $242,000 a year per the agency and City Council's policy to set aside 75% of residential tax increment and 25% of commercial increment to parks and libraries.
So it would be $700,000 upon completion of the project, and then $300,000 each year beyond that?
$240,000 each year. We think over the remaining life of the project, you'll set aside $845,000 in for parks and libraries.
And then what about if the site was to remain as it is, and let's say another retail use moved in? How much would then go to parks and libraries?
It would depend on what level of improvement was made, but you would figure the tax increment that comes off that, approximately 1% of the increase, take 20% of that away for housing set aside, and then you would take 25% of that remaining increment and set that aside for parks and libraries.
Okay.
Sorry, I needed to give you more information, but it'd be 25% of the net tax.
Well, let me just
increment.
ask this. What was Circuit City paying?
Well, Circuit City wasn't paying into the fund at all. I can't tell you what they're.
If I can, you had not established the policy when Circuit City came in, so we would have been collecting tax increment to the redevelopment agency from Circuit City over and above the base, but your policy on parks and libraries hadn't been established when Circuit City
Correct.
came about.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Parker was coming up.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members, Redevelopment Agency members. Within the state, we expect a net growth in the apartment tenants about 300,000 a year for the next 20 years. 250,000 of this group are young adults coming of age each year and moving out into the world. With this recognition, about 3 years ago, we started focusing on this young demographic. With surveys and research, we discovered about 80% of this group, under 30, is single. 2/3 don't want to roommate. In LA, about 30% of this group under 34 have incomes averaging about $55,000 a year. This group can afford average rents of about $1,450 a month. They hate to drive. They want to live in a city where many work and most play, and most are green conscious. After developing prototypes to responding to these needs, we started looking for a site. We were attracted to Glendale because of Caruso's success with the Grove and his choice to build Americana here. After finding the ex-Circuit City site, we realized it was the perfect site for our young urban professionals. It has a walkability beyond any project we could find outside of New York City. Within a quarter of a mile, there are 108 restaurants, 61 clothing and apparel stores, 28 beauty-related businesses, 22 bus stops, 8 churches, and many other urban amenities. We also recognize that within a 2-mile radius that there were 4,500 young urban professional jobs, most in the entertainment, medical, and Glendale's corporate centers. Many of these young professionals don't currently live in the city. This is our target market. Last March, we brought before the council this 248-unit apartment project with retail on the ground floor designed to attract young urban professionals. Following our Stage 1 approval, we were caught up in the infectious enthusiasm of your staff. Concurrently, the Arts and Entertainment District was beginning to take form. Working with staff, we transformed our March concept into this center for the new Arts and Entertainment District, including ground floor outside dining, opening onto Maryland, and reducing the number of apartment units to 208. With staff's further encouragement, we transformed this rooftop open area we presented you last March into an active, green, alive roof deck that will provide the project's central amenity. This includes 10 cabanas that provide outdoor living rooms, our Poets Corner on the corner of Broadway and Maryland, outdoor chess area, dog park, spa and sunning area, dining, and a party area with views of Glendale and LA city lights at night. Through our recycled decking material and a unique roof deck design which provides ventilation for the roof below, and with our other efforts to conserve energy, this project will be the first LEED Silver multifamily project to our understanding in Glendale. In responding to your concerns last March, we have refined our unit mix. We have enlarged nearly half of our loft units to over 600 square feet and added 2-bedroom units to accommodate the 1/3 of our target market that wants a roommate. As we said last March we would do, half of our units have remained lofts, and we have retained the high-end granite countertops and high level of finishes. And the ability to convert these units to 2-bedroom units should the market change for the smaller studios. The discretionary bonus that we're asking for the 25 units is not for FAR, not for building area ratio. That's given us under the other concessions. What we're doing with the additional units is accommodating a lifestyle for this group of young professionals who don't have the money to afford the larger units and don't want to be stuck roommating, which is their only other choice. The other thing that we're doing as a result of this is being driven financially. We're in a market right now. The reason the other projects aren't going ahead is the traditional unit mix that was working 2 years ago won't work today. That's because of the leverage, changes in leverage. 2 years ago, leverage was in the rate of 10% equity and 90% debt. Today, you're lucky to get 65% on the debt side, and the rest has to be equity. That equity dollars are a lot more expensive than debt dollars, and making the traditional projects just unable to pencil in today's environment. An example of what we're doing is pure math, and it's visual on this floor plan here. The 3 sections vertically that you see were previously all studios. We've now combined 3 studios into a 2-bedroom unit. This 2-bedroom unit at market price in our analysis will go for somewhere around $2,500. Those 3 studios averaged at somewhere around $1,400, meaning $4,200 to the project. And we brought down the unit mix and we put in more 2-bedrooms, but we're really right at that point where this project works at this point. So again, we're not asking for any more FAR, we're not asking for bigger envelope, we're just asking for more units to accommodate this particular audience that we're targeting. In addition to bringing young urban professionals into the downtown on a 24/7 basis, revigorating this dead corner and providing a center for the arts and entertainment district, our project will provide tenants with $5 million annually in disposable income to spend in local businesses, 10 to 15 million in annual taxable retail sales, and 100,000 man-hours in construction work. With the council's approval, we're prepared to submit our plans for plan check on the 20th of this month. And we are lining up our financing with the hope of being able to break ground in the January, no later than February timeframe of next year. We're excited about this opportunity to participate in this ongoing evolution of the city under this council's leadership, from a hidden jewel to a nationally recognized jewel. Thank you for considering our project and as part of this transformation.
Question. I'm glad that staff was so helpful and infectious. Who in particular was so helpful from staff?
I think helpful from a standpoint of driving to, certainly not helpful in
the infection part, that's
yeah,
right.
the infection part. Helpful in the sense of driving towards the city's goals of having a project that the city could be proud of, that would enhance this area, that would enhance and further the arts and entertainment district. And I think that goes for everyone that we dealt with. I mean, we've not dealt with a city that was excited and is helpful in the sense of working, helpful in pushing us to further than we frankly would have gone without in developing the design without the staff's.
When you first came to staff, did they inform you that we had a downtown specific plan, which we had adopted just a few years ago?
Yes, they did.
Did they also inform you that your initial project as conceived would require numerous discretionary, say, amendments and discretionary variances to the project as you had originally presented it?
They did. We came to the staff with this concept that we're presenting today. It's been modified. It was 248 units initially. Didn't have any 2 bedrooms initially, and through that interface and the interface here with the council, we have shrunk that down. But we had done our studies prior to coming here, and we knew that that was a financial model that worked in today's environment, one that we could get built. And we came into the city with that in mind.
And you were here before us in March, I think,
Yes.
right? And I certainly, was clear on how I felt about the unit size and the unit makeup, but it wasn't because of my comments that you made the change. It wasn't that your lender indicated that it would be better if you combined some of those units for a different unit mix.
Well, I think you were not the only one that had questions about the unit size, and I think the council was wise in their sense of market acceptance, particularly in the lending community to the project, and we found many of the same feelings in that community.
So the project, as you've presented it to us, is right at its tipping point for sustainability. I mean, for
financially, yeah.
Financial success.
Yes.
How much in art fees do you anticipate paying?
The $300,000 that was presented a couple minutes ago, yes.
Those art fees were waived. Would it be certainly a much more viable project for you?
Everything helps.
Well, we waived the second half of the parks fees last week.
When we started this project, we built it on a pro forma, the fees in place at the time, with the expectation that we would be we would have our permits by that point in time. And with the unusually difficult financial market, it took us this long to get to the point where we were able to get financing lined up.
No, I understand it is difficult, and I think that was clearly the sentiment of the council and the agency last week, is that those additional park and library impact fees would be an extreme burden, which would not make the project viable. And I'm just asking if the additional $300,000 in art fees, if those were somehow set aside or delayed until another year, whether that would help the viability of the project, and I think you said yes, so thank you. Okay, next up.
That concludes our presentation. Just want you to know that staff and the consultants are here to answer any other questions you may have.
Okay, I do have several speaker cards. Why don't we go to the public, and then we can ask our own questions and discuss the item. Helen McDonough, followed by Rick Lemo. And you only get to speak once, Mr. Lemo. I see you have two cards. Nice try.
Two different meetings, I think.
There's lofts on both of them. So.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council members, and members of the agency. The DGMA recommends, my name is Helen McDonough, President of the Downtown Glendale Merchants Association, otherwise known as the DGMA. The DGMA recommends that the city approve the project, including any entitlements as proposed. The project will bring young urban professionals into the downtown area with disposable income who will add to the economic potential of downtown merchants. As a mixed-use project, it will add vibrancy both to Broadway and Maryland, and in general to the downtown area. Our observations. In this economic environment, there is a concern that projects may be started and not completed, that land may be entitled based on a specific project vetted by the community and the city, and then sold with those entitlements for a project without opportunity for input. So we would request that any entitlements that are specific to the project being proposed, that the city will employ mechanisms available to ensure that once ground is broken, the project is completed. And on a final note, you're all familiar with the fact that we're working on a property business improvement district, and we would like to ask the property owner to support our property business improvement district should his project be approved by the City of Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Lemo.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Redevelopment Chair and Council and Agency and staff. My name is Rick Lemo, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Glendale Chamber of Commerce. And our board was asked to take a position on this project, and our board did vote to support the project for many reasons. One of the goal of the Chamber of Commerce is to focus on a viable business community in Glendale, certainly, but also part of our mission is quality of life. We believe providing housing for young urban professionals, which in the old days used to be referred to as yuppies, I don't know what they call them nowadays, is beneficial to the vibrancy of the city and certainly the quality of life. We believe that the tenants will provide $5 million in annual disposable income that we think they'll spend locally. There's 100,000 man-days of construction work, and in this economy, nothing helps the economy more so than jobs. This project will actually, we believe, act as a cornerstone for the entertainment district here in Glendale, which, of course, our chamber is supportive of. It's time to actually revive the Glendale marketplace, and we believe, as we've seen in other places in town, that a 24/7 life really does revitalize a community. So we hope that you will support the project, taking all of the necessary steps you need to make certain that all other aspects, recreation, arts, and all, are covered responsibly. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan DiBartolomeo.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, Redevelopment Agency members, council members, and staff. I am with Broadway Lofts, the project. I want to announce that first, but I'm also here to present and to speak on what I have found up and down Maryland in the little community where we're proposing to build this building, and specifically that those retail tenants there are looking very much forward to getting some life on Maryland. In the approximate year that we've been here, I've gotten to know your city and gotten to know several of the tenants as we go up and down doing our research. I went out and actually I want to hand this over to whoever I might, got support in the way of signatures from a dozen or so of the small businesses. Can I give that to you? I won't read them all here, but maybe just the splattering of them. These are ones that are targeted to our young urban professionals in dining, like the Octopus Japanese Restaurant, the Outback Steakhouse and Tony Roma, some of the larger ones as well, and Angela's Bistro Cafe. And part of what I heard out there as I'm getting to know our to-be neighbors is that it's been tough on the small sole proprietors and on the large businesses as well, and they are very much looking forward to having 250 plus or minus residences on Maryland to enliven the street. And I will say this, speaking for Broadway Lofts, Helen mentioned that she would like us as property owners by the property to support the business investment district. Yes, we will. In fact, we said if we were outside of that, we would ask to be included in it, so our project could contribute and we could have a voice in the business district. So we certainly do support that. Thank you.
You. Greg Astorian. And then I have Greg Parker again. I don't know if you need time again. Greg Astorian.
Good afternoon. Mr. Mayor, my name is Greg Astorian. I'm a commercial real estate practitioner as well as a resident of the city of Glendale. Since you feel an infectious enthusiasm about this project today, I'm wondering if I feel kind of expansive if I could take a little bit more than 3 minutes that is allotted, intellectually as well as physically. So,
well, what do you have in mind?
As far as time?
Requesting some extra time. So what sort of time do you think you...
What can you give?
I'm not here to negotiate, Mr. Astorian, but...
Mayor, are we going on a field trip, or are we...
In 3 minutes.
Okay. As I said, Madam Agency Chair and Mr. Mayor, my name is Greg Astorian.
Let's restart the clock at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Lemo referred to this young aspiring contemporaries as the yuppies. Whether they're the yuppies or the aspiring contemporaries, young urban contemporaries, or the shadow boomers, as they may be known, nationally, they represent about $220 billion in purchasing power. This is a project that is envisioning bringing a cluster of these spenders into the downtown. It's a wonderful idea, especially with the recognition that the entertainment district is going to be up and running, and I think this is going to be the fuel for that. I did a little bit of a informal survey as well with Hollywood Production. As you know, most of the people that work at Hollywood Production are part of the entertainment business. The question was asked from 100 tenants. If there had a project across the street at $1,400 or $1,500 for a loft of 600 square feet or 500 square feet, whether or not they would consider moving into the city of Glendale. And I can tell you that overwhelmingly, the response was yes. So I mean, it goes without saying that this is a great project, and I think it'll be a wonderful addition to the downtown. Having said that, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Astoria. Mr. Parker has indicated that he would not need extra time to speak. So let me take it to... I will close the public hearing. Comments? Mr. Quintero.
Okay, I will start. Well, let me say the discussion about young urban professionals and so forth, I'm always looking for sites that eventually Mr. Weaver and I will be moving into. So this is and he keeps rejecting my offer. There's probably going to be a tenant association. We could run for the board.
Hey, we'll take two separate units. We're no partners.
No, you're absolutely right. But anyway, I'll start my comments. I'm very, very happy that we've come to the vote today, because quite frankly, from the very beginning, I was somewhat nervous that this wouldn't get funded, that there wouldn't be the opportunity to have this type of project in that location. But fortunately, the developers have gone forward and worked with the staff and put together a great building. I like it on multiple levels. I like the design very much. I'm very, compared to the first, I think Mr. Loomis did a great job in whatever architectural firm the developers employed, but I think they did a very good job of putting together a very interesting building. And I'm specifically happy with the way it addresses the street, Maryland primarily, and then also Broadway. It's sort of, you almost have a porch there in your commercial frontage, as well as plenty of seating for tenants and for customers for the different businesses that you plan to come in. I think it's going to be a big boom, not just to the exchange, but also to Maryland in general. As we all know, Maryland has been, it hasn't been doing well for many years. Mid-Brand also has issues, and I think this is a beginning of a situation where these very tenants and people that come to visit them will be meeting and doing different things in the surrounding neighborhood. I'm also very pleased that the developers have come up with this modular concept where, in fact, as the market changes, maybe people sometimes may start with a studio and then perhaps get married and decide they want a one-bedroom or even a two-bedroom, et cetera, et cetera. So the concept of being able to shift into larger units, I think that makes a lot of sense. But I'm just very pleased. I'm extremely pleased that it's gotten a Silver LEEDs or will get a Silver LEEDs designation. I think that's a super plus. I know there's a few issues having to do with hot water, heating, et cetera. I hope we can work through that and come up with a plan that does work out in terms of environmental concerns and the Department of Glendale Water and Power. But I want to thank everyone, the team that put this together, that worked on it. I'm very excited, and hopefully we'll break ground soon, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a commercial success. I'm very convinced.
Thank you. Before I go to my colleagues, I'd like to raise an issue which may take the form of an amendment or something to be placed on a future agenda. I don't think it's any secret about how I feel about this project. However, one of my main concerns revolves around the impact of parks and libraries. I would like to place as an issue for discussion at this moment, perhaps to be formalized at a later meeting, the idea of backfilling the arts fees, which are approximately $300,000, which the developer indicated he's willing to pay and intends to pay, to replace the Parks and Library Impact Fee freeze, which we placed last week. There's a lot more that's being taken off the table with the Parks and Library Impact Fee. I would like to see if that is something that the council, agency, authority would like to discuss at this point. An indication that there's a backfilling would certainly go a long way towards me accepting this project. And if not, I certainly have a lot to say, and I've got my tape, and I'm going to measure out the size of the units and talk about other things that may lead us to more vigorous discussion. But let me throw that out. We talked about it last week, and let me see how everyone feels about that. Ms. Friedman.
Well, I would be willing, of course, I'm always willing to discuss anything, so I would discuss it, but I'll tell you my feelings about it, which I don't think are going to change. I would be willing to talk about backfilling that fee with perhaps money out of the redevelopment agency, if that's possible. But I'm not going to pit the arts against parks. I think it's a false comparison. I don't think that we should be trying to have different amenities competing against each other. The fact is that parks and libraries receive what percentage from projects currently? Downtown? Is it 7%?
75% of residential,
They receive-
25% of commercial.
I'm sorry?
By policy.
75% of...
Say that again, because...
70, correct, Jillian, 75% of residential. That's construction since the policy. New construction since the policy was adopted. 25% of commercial.
Okay, so parks and libraries receive an impact fee. Currently, the arts do not. So first, we don't even know if we have what kind of an arts fee we're going to have after the next meeting we're going to have. But to me, I'm not going to say that parks or libraries are more or less of a priority than the arts. I think that we need to figure out the impacts we want for all of that. So I will never say the arts are less important than libraries, and therefore let's increase the funding for libraries and not have any funding for the arts, which is really what's being suggested. But I do think that if we feel that there's a bigger impact in terms of parks and libraries from this project, maybe we can make that up in some other way through the redevelopment agency. That I would be open to.
And my only response is that to make this project a reality, we, council or the agency, must find a statement of overriding considerations, in particular for the significant and unavoidable impact to recreation, use of recreational facilities. The arts do not seem to be one of those areas where we are required to, where a significant and unavoidable impact has been determined. And in fact, we are, like it or not, what we did last week was place and what we're continuing today is placing the arts ahead of the parks and libraries. The parks libraries impact fee was put into effect years ago, and this council saw fit to alleviate the requirement to stick to those requirements just last week. So in essence, I think, I think it is a choice at this point to choose whether we're going to make this developer pay the arts fee. And even if we're not going to backfill, since we're so excited about getting this project forward, I would propose that we waive the arts fee altogether.
Well,
certainly would make it more viable, as they said, and I don't hear them objecting at this point. So that was our overriding.
I don't understand the backfill. What do you mean by backfill?
The $300,000 that they're going to be paying as an arts fee to be put back into the Parks and Library fee that we relieved them from last week. The additional, the next phase of the Parks and Library fees.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Chair, if I could just briefly discuss sort of the mechanics, because and make sure we're all talking the same terminology. And this is on the agenda also to discuss how the fees are going to be imposed and whether or not the agency allocates additional revenue for parks and libraries from this project. But the agency can allocate additional funds, tax increment funds, beyond the 75-25 split to parks and libraries from this project. It has legal authority to do that, and it's also part of the agenda. To actually waive the fee from library, for the arts. Remember, that's a development standard that's in our DSP currently, and they are electing to pay the 1% fee rather than provide it on site. But they're electing to do that. We can't. That's not something that can be waived without. They could, for example, apply for a variance. But it's like any other development standard. It's not something we can legally change without somehow going through our procedure, our code, and modifying that. But again, the allocation of tax increment can be done because that's something we've done in the past, and it's certainly something that's on your agenda to do today if you'd like to.
Your last sentence again, I'm sorry.
That it's on your agenda today if you want to allocate additional tax increment revenues from this project to parks and libraries, you can do that today.
Someone elaborate on that concept.
Sure. Essentially, and Mr. Lansfane could probably go through the numbers of what that would mean, but as Mr. Starbird stated, 75% of the tax increment, after payment of all the other obligations, will go from the residential component of the project, go to parks and libraries. 25% of the commercial component go to parks and libraries. And if the redevelopment agency, wants to increase those allocations from this project, it can do so. And Mr. Lansfane, I think, can maybe go through the numbers if you'd like.
If we have the numbers that would, Mr. Starbird, do you have some?
Just a little more on the concept. The concept is, and Mr. Lansfane can get into the details if you wish, but the concept is that over the remaining life of the project area, pursuant to your policy, this project, when completed, will generate the parks and library fees that would have come had you not extended the second tier. But only shy of that number by about $250,000, correct, Phil? And I think what the mayor is suggesting is look at the ability to backfill that $250,000 so that over the remaining 6 years of the project area, this project would generate the entire parks and library fees that it would have had you not made the change you did last week.
Well, we had two funding sources. We had the tax increment, and we had the parks and impact fee. So you're saying that the tax increment in any event is going to equal what we otherwise would have had from that. We're not adding, we're not getting both in this scenario.
Well,
you're saying the waived parks fee.
This project will already generate roughly $780,000 in park and library impact fees, Phil?
Yeah.
Off of the existing tier.
I don't think you're concerned. I think what you're concerned about is not the case. There is a impact fee for parks that is being paid at the first phase. We have a difference of what that is, but it ultimately be valued on the building. What we're suggesting is once the project is completed, there is an additional amount of tax increment that is set aside for parks and libraries. And then there's some that comes to the redevelopment agency for your general use. The concept here would be that we collect the fee, we set aside the tax increment per the policy, and then we take that balance of tax increment and we commit that also to Parks and Recreation. That's about under our calculations of value, about $500,000, and then there's another maybe $250,000 that.
Okay, I understand.
That brings you up to what the second
understand.
tier would have been.
Correct.
If the agency sees fit to make such an allocation and reallocation, I would withdraw my strong opposition to this project.
And that's what I was suggesting when I said the agency make that money up. I meant through the tax increment.
I'm more than happy, since I was the one that pushed for the whole tax increment and the 75%. I would be more than happy to fill that.
More than one of us pushing for it.
Yeah, I'll be happy to fill that gap, and if it's 500,000 and then another 250, whatever the numbers are, I'll be more than happy to do that.
Mr. Draymond.
I have a more basic question, Mr. Mayor. Now, which one of those options would keep you from using all of these props that you've brought? And were you planning on fencing off the dais as a public nuisance with that, is my other question. No, I think that, quite frankly, and I don't mean to assume that Mr. Weaver is of the same mind as the rest of our colleagues, but because he can speak for himself. But I think you're welcome, Mr. Weaver. I think what you're hearing, though, is that there certainly is a willingness. It's not that your concerns, Mayor Najarian, are falling on deaf ears. Certainly not by your colleague in the chair to your left. It's simply that I think that there is agreement, aside from those fees and impact fees, that this is a good project for our downtown. And I think you're hearing that from a large cross-section of interested parties. So if there is a way to move forward with this project, we all benefit if those numbers are backfilled, and the larger community also benefits outside of the downtown area if those numbers are backfilled. So I would certainly join Chair Friedman and Councilmember Montero in that.
We go to our city attorney and get a better understanding as what is actually required to make our comments a reality in terms of a motion.
Actually, while you're going through, you've got a number of other actions and other comments. We'll craft some quick language for you to add on an additional motion to essentially confirm that we'll backfill with the additional TI from this project, tax increment from this project. And that was one thing I need to discuss with staff, whether we're going to reach a specific threshold or just backfill with the remainder of the TI, whether it's a certain level or not. And that's something I can caucus with staff quickly.
Let me inquire of Mr. Weaver how he feels about that proposal.
Oh, I don't care. Seems like everybody loves the idea, so let's do it. I'd like to get on with a review of this project then.
I think this would save us significant time. Okay, so with the understanding that that is something we will have before us at the end of the action items, let's continue with discussions. Mr. Mincy or Laura or Mr. Weaver or anyone else who wants to get into the
the fact that it will improve that Maryland situation is going to make such a difference, plus the type of person you're looking for, the youthful professional. Makes complete sense.
Thank you. Let me go back to Mr. Draymond. I think I cut him off.
No, that's quite all right. I can make my comments now if you like, Mr. Mayor. Well, I say obviously, maybe it isn't so obvious. When I ran for office in 2007, the issues that I was discussing at that time and the issues that our residents were discussing with me as it relates to development had a lot to do with making sure that the development we pursued was primarily focused in the downtown, number one. Number two, that the development that we were going to pursue in the downtown was well-conceived, forward-looking residential projects. C, that they would be projects that would seek to create more stakeholders in the downtown, not necessarily stakeholders in the sense of owning their property, but stakeholders in our downtown. And what I talked about a lot at that time, probably to the point that people got sick of me hearing it, was that, and we're hearing those same terms tonight, young urban professionals, people who are a part of our population 24/7. These were phrases I was using at that time, and I believe them to this day. In order for us to have a more viable downtown and have people who are going to contribute to our revenues in this city, to buy goods and services, spin off retail, et cetera, we need to start converting some of the people who are a part of our population currently from 9 to 5, this population of young, this demographic of young urban professionals who have a disposable income from 60 or 80,000 people who are just in this city 9 to 5. Is it something I said? Is everybody's leaving the room, I guess?
Oh, that's just the city manager.
I promise I'll end at some point. You all can come back. But in any case, we need to take that population, 60 to 80,000 people who are part of our downtown population from 9 to 5, and make them part of our downtown population 24/7, so that they're not ending their workday, taking their disposable income, and leaving the city and going elsewhere to spend it. At the time, we were talking to these folks, and the question was, what would it take to make you part of our city and our downtown? And the answer was, a housing inventory that is desirable to us. And there just isn't that kind of housing inventory being built right now in the downtown. Of course, then a lot of things happened, and the economy changed, and the housing market began to spiral, and so on. This is an opportunity to add to our housing inventory that very focused, that very forward-looking kind of housing where we will be attracting and facilitating a targeted audience. And the targeted audience is age and income demographic that will be supporting our downtown merchants, supporting the arts, supporting our retails, and so on. So this is not just a good idea. I think it's a great idea, but I also think it's an essential component to rebuilding our downtown. And I think that as we go through the remainder of this recession and the recovery, we're going to see just how important this project, important engine this project will be. In terms of arts and entertainment district, I think it's also essential. No matter who I've spoken to in this city with regard to Maryland, the Exchange, the Marketplace, and why, to be very honest, the Exchange has never really worked economically, it's because we're missing a critical element. And the critical element is housing. The critical element is residential housing in an age and income demographic that is going to spend. So we have shifted the way we're looking at the revitalization of Maryland. We have amended the zoning to accommodate it, and we are adding this residential component, people who will spend dollars. By the way, that's not going to be limited to Maryland. That's going to help Brand as well, and it's going to help a lot of the retail areas in downtown Glendale. So I am supportive of this project. I'm very happy that the developers have listened to the comments of our council, agency, housing department as we've gone through these, and staff, of course, as we've gone through these various meetings, and they have adjusted the number of units, they've adjusted the size of the units, they've adjusted and more keenly focused this project. I think it's a winner, and everything from the architectural, from the look of the project to the mix of unit sizes and so on is far more focused. I think it's a better project than when we started. I thank them for that. I thank staff for that. I thank my colleagues for that. Lastly, I want to thank my colleagues for working so hard to make this come forward in a way that is acceptable and will work at its best for our residents and our merchants. This has not been easy, and you all can tell. I mean, there's a lot of issues related to this, and to be able to work through them is not easy. So With that, Mr. Mayor, I'll stop talking. Perhaps we can cue the city manager that he can come back now. rest of our staff. And if someone, Mr. Lemo or someone, could wake up the rest of the audience, please, that would be.
I think they're out there working on that addition that
Ms. Parazian.
the mayor wants.
Okay, to me, it's a win-win situation for the young professionals, as everybody indicated, and to the if I'm not mistaken, for 14 lucky households that will get the units, no cost to the housing authority, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver.
I want to hear from the other Laura up there.
Okay. Ms. Friedman.
Well, I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's been said. I agree with pretty much everything that's been said, except for maybe by Mr. Najarian. When I was in my early 20s, after living with roommates in, far-off places in New York City like Brooklyn and, trying to always get closer and closer to Manhattan, I finally scored that studio apartment that was maybe 200 square feet, maybe, and that's being generous. You could not put your arms out and twirl, but by God, I love that apartment, and I have never loved a place that I lived in more than that apartment. It didn't matter that it was small. I was in my 20s, and I was in the middle of a downtown, and I was in my own apartment for the very first time in my life. And if you think about it, we've done a lot for affordable housing in Glendale, senior housing, market rate housing, but we have never, that I know of, targeted this demographic of people in their 20s and their 30s. And they need places to live too. And right now, a lot of them are living at home, or they're living in other cities. They're living in Hollywood, they're living in Santa Monica, because they offer this kind of housing, and Glendale doesn't. And we will never be a city that has a young and vibrant community unless we have housing for young and vibrant people. And this is the beginning of that. So I don't just think that this is a project that I can support. To me, it's a project that's very important for the downtown. And it does a lot of the things that we talk about wanting. We want people to be able to live near where they work. And this is a demographic that tends to work in the downtown, as the developer showed us. These are the people that are working at Hollywood Production Center. These are the people that are working at Disney that want to be able to live near where they can work. And the benefit for the city is that you have less people driving in and out of the city every day to go to work. Now they can walk to work, or they can bicycle to work. And these are people that will do that. In terms of the concessions that we were talking about, it's interesting to me because we set up this series of, as a city, of incentives. We want you to do certain things, and so we're going to give you certain benefits. And here's a developer who's come in and done that. They've given us affordable housing without us having to spend taxpayer dollars on it, which is something that we normally have to do. We spend public money on affordable housing. Here, they're providing it for us without us putting money in. They're building us the first silver LEED residential building in Glendale. They're doing a lot of the things that we want, and so they're taking the incentives that we've offered, and yet some of my colleagues seem to act like that's a bad thing. Oh no, look at all of these variances or all of these concessions they want. Well, these are concessions that they're entitled to. The only one that I can see that they're not, because they're entitled to the density and they're entitled to the height, and then they're entitled to 2 additional concessions. So they're already within that envelope of what they're legally entitled to. The only thing that I saw that they're not legally entitled to, that they're asking for, is, number one, to be able to use the ground floor for recreation. Can you believe that in an area that we want to have arts and entertainment in, we don't yet have a mechanism by which a developer can provide indoor recreation? Something we need to take care of. So to me, that's not anything that they're asking for that's special. It's something that should already be in place for this district. We just haven't caught up yet. Our code hasn't caught up. It's the same with their signage. Why can we have signage on Maryland but not on on Broadway? They're asking to put up the kind of signage that you'd want in a vibrant downtown kind of environment. Our codes just haven't caught up yet with the use that we want, which is an arts and entertainment kind of district. They're asking for 4 parking spaces for their guest residential. To me, in a building of this size with over 200 units, asking for 4 spaces for guests where you're already next to a giant city parking lot is not asking for a whole lot. So I don't have any problem granting them those variances or those concessions. And I do believe that there's a very big overriding public benefit to this, which is taking an existing site that is blighted, that's been blighted for a while now, and that nobody has shown any interest in doing anything else with that I know of, which is graffitied, which is dirty in front, and turning it into a place that is active, that's taken care of, that's maintained, and that adds to our downtown. It will help all of the merchants along Brand and certainly on Maryland. It'll help the restaurants. It'll be a destination for people in Glendale to go and have a nice time. I do hope that they end up with something like a Lucky Strikes, something that's an active use that can be a place that people want to go and recreate in. Is that a word? Recreate? I think that we're lacking that. We have a lot of retail recreation, but we don't have a lot of just fun recreation. So that would be a good thing to have down there. And it's a high-class project that will add a lot to the area, and I'm looking forward to seeing it move forward. And I want to thank the developer for doing what we asked, for redesigning the building, for redesigning the spaces, for being interested in Glendale at a time when there's not a lot of developers interested in anything right now, and for working with us and being so enthusiastic and working with the staff and using our incentive program. So thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Weaver.
I listed down a bunch of things. I hope I can get them in order here. I think I've had at least 3 meetings with Mr. Parker on his project. I was concerned about the roof design. I was concerned about the units sizes. I was concerned about the bowling alley on the corner and the architecture and outdoor dining. I don't know, what I'm looking at now has now addressed all of my questions or my concerns on this project, which I did not support at the beginning. I think the architecture is unique and different. It's not a block wall. It's got good character in it. I think Mr. Loomis had a lot to do with that, which I like. Let's see, 2, 3. I know that on the Americana, the apartments are already 98% leased. There's only 18 condos left. So housing downtown is working. Now, this one, I was concerned about the small units, but there is ability now to double the sizes if the niche market they're trying to serve doesn't work, which then works for me. And if it's working down there at the Americana, it's going to work here, a couple blocks away. It's been talked about this as a niche market for the young out in Santa Monica, I guess. But what's wrong with old-timers like Mr. Quintero and I, moving from
I meant you, Mr. Weaver, not you.
Thank you. Do you know what I mean? Let's say I'm alone, a widow or a widower. Why does it have to be the young? The old could like it too. So I think it works both ways. The roof, I talked at length, read about these places on rooftops in Hollywood, whatever. That's what I was kind of visualizing here, and I said, sun during the summer when it's 100 degrees and you come home to your unit and you want to go up on the roof, you don't want the blinding sun or the glaring sun and 100-degree heat to hit you. We had to increase the shading a lot up there, which I think they've done. I think there's some water feature in there. It's got to be attractive. You want to go up there when you get home and relax, have a drink or whatever. I think they're achieving that. And I guess we're going to get our first dog park in Glendale, but I think it's a little different than the normal dog park that we're thinking of. Let's see, what else? Oh, yeah, and as far as restaurants, I hope there's a restaurant on that front floor. I talked about outdoor dining. I mentioned Americana with Katsuya, Frida, Cheesecake Factory, the Michis, and the hamburger place all have outdoor dining. And any of the times I go to any of those, the first place people want to eat is outside. So I said, if there's a way for you to create outdoor dining, it's going to be a winner. That's happened too. I remember growing up here, Broadway and Brand was the center of Glendale. Not down where the Americana is, it was Broadway and Brand. That's where I bought my comic books. That's where my father went to the banks. That's where the drugstore was. It was the center of Glendale. It's where the streetcars went. and to me, it still is. Circuit City, I was here to vote against that project, because what I had discovered was that they would probably take all the windows in it and they would use it for storage space for the product. That's what you see in the Galleria. It's all brick walls because that's where all the product that retailers are trying to sell are stored. And that's what Circuit City did. No entrance out onto Broadway and Maryland from Circuit City at all. So I voted against it, and I'm happy to see it be demoed. Going to do it, I'll be there to watch it and take pictures. You have to remember that we rezoned Broadway 2 to bring in more retail and housing above, all along Broadway, clear up to City Hall. Eventually it will happen. You have a lot of people living there, a lot of foot traffic just coming from that sector down to this area. It's a lot of foot traffic. What else I want to talk about? Hit just about everything. I understand the funding problems that have occurred. I understand why it would have taken longer to line up that funding. I think we're making the right move by not increasing the impact fees when at the time of the performance and everything was being done, they assumed they would be able to get under construction earlier than they have. And I'm glad to see they're going to plan check this month. Hope they get expedited. Probably won't need expedited. Nothing's being done in this town lately. This will be the first thing that's gone on for a long time. We just cannot let it get away. We said no to this today. That Circuit City site will be sitting there for the next 2 or 3 years. This is just too good to pass up on. I'm very grateful for them coming along, and again to say that I appreciate all the effort Mr. Parker did in listening to all of us, the council members and the staff, to bring it forth to this, what I think is going to be a very great addition to downtown Glendale. So I'll support all the motions when it comes up.
Okay. Mr. Howard, do we have an action item?
Mr. Mayor, I think it would be useful to first understand the numbers that we're talking about here. So let me run through a few of them. As it relates to this project, the Parks and Library fee that they will pay under the level that was in effect and is still in effect for Parks and Library is approximately $762,000. This project will still be responsible for that. What the project was relieved of, as of your action last week, was an equal amount of that Park and Library fee. This project is estimated over the remaining life of the project area, the downtown project area. And it's anticipated the project will complete construction and be on the rolls about the end of calendar year 2012. Will produce over the remaining 3 to 4 year life of the project area approximately $850,000 in set aside per your policy that would go toward library and parks. So at that point, with the project going forward, it will produce in that 3.5 years about $80,000 more than it would have produced in the park fee had you not made the change you did last week.
Explain that?
Yeah. Your policy sets aside 25% of commercial development, 75% of residential development for parks and library improvements. This project will produce, over the 3.5 years the project area is still in effect after its completion, per that policy, roughly $850,000. Now, if what you're looking at producing, if what you're looking at committing is what it would have produced in additional park fees, $760,000, in addition to what your policy sets aside, then you need to make an additional allocation. And that's where the next two numbers come into play. The tax increment contributed by this project over and above your policy toward parks and library, or over and above your policy for parks and libraries, is roughly $500,000. So the tax increment that is not committed to parks and libraries under your policy, this project will produce is about $500,000 in the 3.5 year remaining life of the project area. So if you wanted to commit to parks and libraries both the initial fee that it's paying and is not relieved of, plus the amount that will be produced over the project area for the remaining 3.5 years of the project, and in addition to that, then, the fee that they were relieved of, then you'd commit all of the tax increment off of this project toward Parks and Library and need to come up with an additional $265,000. Now, the other way that I've been looking at it and described to you, Mr. Mayor, was that the difference between what the project will produce under your policy and what it would have paid if you had not made the adjustment last week, that amount would be backfilled. But the project already produces more under your policy than the additional step in the Parks and Library fees would have produced.
Okay, so I would accept that if the numbers as indicated would leave just a $200,000 short of what its full load of fees and increment would have
Actually,
been.
the project will produce about $100,000 more than what its full load of park and library fees would have been. Now, that's our economist's estimate. Things could change. The project's assessed value could be appealed. Who knows what might happen. But your policy could provide that we will commit up to, in tax increment, the full amount of what would have been produced had you not made the adjustment you did last week. And we think it'll produce more than that, but we could ensure that
we have a motion
by
for
your
that?
action. I didn't draft one.
Or resolution, or...
It'll be a motion.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That'll be M.
You don't have to ascribe a particular letter to it, but we can do it as a
Well,
motion.
it'll follow the others.
It can certainly follow the others or be in front of the others. Or actually, it can't be in front of A and B.
Okay, so let's go through this. Is there a motion for 1A?
Yes.
I will move.
That's
I'll
an
move
agency
1A.
move.
Second it.
Agency resolution.
For the agency.
For the agency. I'll second it.
We take roll call for each separately, or can we take them all together? Okay, can we have roll call?
1A and B have to be taken separately. You can group C through F and K as agencies, and G through J and L as council motions, and then we have a separate motion on the allocation of the tax increment.
There was two motions, motion in 2 seconds. What do you have down, just so there's not two? And
Okay.
And is that for 1A
That's
and B?
fine.
No, just 1A.
1A.
1A, okay.
Okay.
As an agency matter.
Because I heard Frank, too. So.
Okay, so then why don't we have a roll call for the agency?
Yes.
Sorry, Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Chair Friedman.
Yes.
I'll move 1B for the council.
Second.
Second. Roll call, please, 1B.
Council members Draymond.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes.
I can move 1C, D, E, and F,
And K.
and K for the agency.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
I'll second.
Oh, we have
Hold on.
a second by Mr. Quintero.
Your second?
Frank.
Member Quintero.
Thank you.
Roll
Roll call for the agency. Draymond.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Chair Friedman.
Yes.
I'd like to move 1G, H, I, J, and L for the council.
Second.
Roll call, please, for council.
Council members Draymond.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes.
It's the last
And the
one.
special motion?
Is that a council motion?
It'll be an agency motion.
Special K.
I will make that motion.
And that motion, and Mr. Starber can fill in the blank here, it's that the agency approves the allocation of tax increment from the Broadway Lofts Entertainment Project to be located at 200 East Broadway for parks and libraries as follows. And if you can just...
Let me try one if I
may
can.
have some other language.
Here's something I just crafted. A motion with respect to the Broadway Lofts project, the current agency policy of setting aside 25% of tax increment on the commercial component of the development and 75% of tax increment on the residential component of the development shall be adjusted as necessary to a level over the remaining life of the central project area that will provide tax increment committed to Parks and Library improvements as if the December 1, 2010 Parks and Library impact fee tier had not been extended as approved by the City Council at its meeting of November 30th.
So moved.
I'll second it, and I assume if this motion...
Is that agency?
As if it had not been extended?
Yeah, as if the tier had applied to this project on December 1, 2010. That's the tier that you extended.
That is so poetic, Mr. Mayor.
And I assume if this does not pass...
Keep in mind, our attorney is saying it's a little wordy.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Mr. Starbird, I'm just saying, if this motion doesn't pass, the mayor here, having voted for everything else, is going to go after
For
the four of us.
Okay,
Big
can we have a
time.
roll call, please?
Agency members Draymond.
Yes.
Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Chair Friedman.
Yes.
Move to adjourn for the agency.
So moved. Second.
He is adjourned.
Move to adjourn for the council.
Second.
Council's adjourned.
Move we adjourn.